Picture this. A store so massive, so dominant, that its name became a verb in American households. Let's go to Bed Bath. Millions of people walked through those doors every single week, armed with a giant blue coupon they'd been mailing you since before you could drive. At its peak, Bed Bath & Beyond was worth over $14 billion. It ran more than 1,500 stores across the country. It was the single biggest name in home goods in the United States, bigger than Target's home section, bigger than Macy's, bigger than anyone. But just a few years later, the shelves were empty. The lights were off. And the company that once seemed too big to fail, filed for bankruptcy, got sold off in pieces, and disappeared from the mall as fast as it once conquered it. How does a company worth $14 billion just vanish? Stick around, because the answer isn't one bad decision. It's a slow-motion collapse, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a retail giant can look completely fine, right up until the moment it isn't. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire story, how Bed Bath & Beyond built one of the most recognizable brands in American retail, why it grew faster than almost anyone expected, and exactly what went wrong behind the scenes while customers had no idea anything was off. We'll cover the coupons, the empty shelves, the executives who bet the company's future on private label products nobody asked for, and the final months when suppliers quietly stopped trusting the company to pay its bills. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you something strange. The Bed Bath & Beyond name, the actual brand, is still alive today. It didn't die with the company. Someone bought it for pennies on the dollar, and what they did with it might be the most unexpected twist in this entire story. So let's start at the beginning, because to understand how something this big falls apart, you first have to understand why it worked in the first place. Bed Bath & Beyond wasn't always a giant. It started small, back in 1971, as a single home goods store built on a simple idea that sounds almost too obvious now. What if there was one place where you could buy literally everything for your home? Not just bedding, not just bath towels, but everything in between. That's where the Beyond came from. At the time, most home goods shopping was fragmented. You'd go to one store for towels, a department store for bedding, a hardware store for kitchen gadgets. Nobody had built a single destination that covered the entire home in one visit. Bed Bath & Beyond did the opposite of everyone else. Instead of specializing, it went wide, betting that convenience and selection would beat specialization. The timing was perfect. As American suburbs expanded through the 80s and 90s, big box retail was exploding. People wanted large stores with huge selection under one roof, and they wanted to feel like they were getting a deal. Bed Bath & Beyond leaned into both instincts at once. And then there was the coupon. That oversized, unmistakable 20% off coupon that showed up in mailboxes across the country became one of the most recognizable pieces of direct mail marketing in retail history. It wasn't just a discount, it was a habit. Families kept them in kitchen drawers. People joked about never actually paying full price at Bed Bath & Beyond. That coupon did something most retailers only dream of. It turned pricing into a relationship with the customer, not just a transaction. On top of that, Bed Bath & Beyond became the default wedding registry destination in America. Think about what that actually means for a business. You're not just selling products, you're inserting yourself into one of the biggest life milestones a young couple goes through. That builds loyalty that lasts decades, because people don't forget where they registered when they got married. Competitors couldn't easily replicate this. Department stores were too formal and too expensive. Discount chains didn't have the selection or the perceived quality. Bed Bath & Beyond occupied a lane almost nobody else could touch: mid-market, huge selection, constant discounts, and deep emotional ties to major life events. People weren't just hungry for a home goods store. They were hungry for this specific formula: abundance, savings, and familiarity, all wrapped into one blue and white box store sitting off the highway exit. And for decades, it worked spectacularly. So why did Bed Bath & Beyond grow as fast as it did? It came down to a business model advantage that looked almost boring on paper but was incredibly effective in practice: scale and selection, funded by real margins. Unlike grocery stores or discount retailers running on razor-thin profit, home goods carried healthy markups. Towels, bedding, kitchenware, these weren't commodity items with constant price wars. That meant Bed Bath & Beyond could afford to hand out those massive coupons and still turn a solid profit, because the base margins gave them room to play. That extra margin became the engine. It funded new store openings year after year, market after market. Instead of franchising out the brand, which usually means giving up quality control and diluting the experience, the company mostly grew through direct, corporately owned expansion. That meant every store looked the same, felt the same, and delivered the same reliable experience whether you were in New Jersey or Nevada. Consistency built trust, and trust fueled repeat visits. The company also leaned hard into sheer physical footprint as a moat. A 50,000 square foot store stuffed with inventory is genuinely hard to compete with if you're a smaller specialty shop. Customers who wanted selection had almost nowhere else to go. And because Bed Bath & Beyond controlled so much shelf space, it had serious leverage with suppliers, better terms, better exclusives, better pricing that smaller competitors simply couldn't access. Then there was the acquisition strategy. Over time, the company expanded beyond its core brand, picking up Bye Bye Baby, Harmon face values, and for a while, Cost Plus World Market, building out a small empire of home and specialty retail rather than just one chain. This diversification let the company capture different customer segments: new parents, beauty shoppers, home decorators, all under one corporate umbrella. This allowed them to grow faster than anyone thought possible. By the 2000s, Bed Bath & Beyond wasn't just a home goods store anymore. It was a retail institution, growing into a network of more than 1,500 stores across multiple brands, cash flow positive, debt light, and seemingly unstoppable. By the mid-2000s, Bed Bath & Beyond looked like it could do no wrong. Wall Street loved it. It was a Wall Street darling, consistently profitable, consistently expanding, with almost no long-term debt on its books, which was almost unheard of for a retailer of its size. The brand had become part of American culture. Everybody knew what those coupons looked like. Everybody had a Bed Bath & Beyond wedding registry story, or a clearing out the dorm room trip, or a furnishing the first apartment haul. It was the retail equivalent of a rite of passage. Financially, the company was firing on all cylinders. Revenue climbed year after year. New stores kept opening in nearly every major market in the country. Analysts pointed to it as a model of disciplined, profitable retail growth, proof that a physical, brick-and-mortar chain could keep expanding in an era when plenty of other retailers were starting to struggle. There was no hint of trouble on the horizon. No warning signs in the headlines. To the outside world, and frankly to most people working inside the company, Bed Bath & Beyond looked like a business that had figured it all out, stable, beloved, and seemingly built to last forever. It's easy to look back now and spot the cracks. But at this exact moment in the story, nobody was looking for cracks. Everybody believed this company simply couldn't lose. Here's the thing about companies that look unstoppable: the seeds of the collapse are almost always planted while everything still looks great. And for Bed Bath & Beyond, that seed was a quiet one, an over-reliance on a business model that depended entirely on constant, deep discounting. Those famous 20% off coupons weren't just a marketing gimmick, they were structural. Over time, customers stopped seeing Bed Bath & Beyond's regular prices as real prices at all. Everyone waited for the coupon. Everyone assumed a discount was coming. That's a dangerous habit to build into your customer base, because it slowly erodes the margin cushion the entire business model depended on. At the same time, something else was happening quietly in the background: e-commerce. While Amazon and other online retailers were investing heavily in digital infrastructure, fast shipping, and online customer experience throughout the 2000s and early 2010s, Bed Bath & Beyond stayed largely committed to its physical store playbook, the same formula that had worked for decades. This worked, but it planted the seeds of something dangerous. Being the biggest physical destination for home goods meant nothing once shoppers could get the same towels, the same bedding, delivered to their door in 2 days without ever leaving the couch. The company's greatest strength, its massive physical footprint, was quietly turning into its greatest liability, and almost nobody inside the company was treating it like an emergency yet. It wasn't fatal. Not yet. But the clock had started. Once the cracks started spreading, they didn't stop at one problem. They piled on top of each other. First, the market shifted. E-commerce kept eating into physical retail's share of home goods spending, and this time it wasn't a slow trickle, it was a flood. Consumers, especially younger ones, increasingly defaulted to ordering online first and only visiting a physical store as a backup. Bed Bath & Beyond had built an empire on foot traffic, and foot traffic was the exact thing that was disappearing. Then came the competition. Amazon was the obvious threat, but it wasn't alone. Target and Walmart were investing heavily in both their home goods sections and their own e-commerce platforms, undercutting Bed Bath & Beyond on price while matching or beating it on convenience. Specialty online players like Wayfair built entire businesses purely around the home goods category, digitally native from day one, with none of the overhead of maintaining 1,500 physical stores. Bed Bath & Beyond was suddenly being squeezed from every direction at once. Reputation damage came next, and it arrived through a decision that seemed logical on paper but backfired badly in practice. Around 2019, under new leadership brought in to modernize the brand, the company launched an aggressive turnaround strategy. A major piece of that strategy involved leaning hard into private label products, store-owned brands with better margins, while pulling back shelf space from the popular national brands customers actually trusted and specifically shopped for. It sounds smart from a spreadsheet, higher margins per item sold. But customers didn't want unfamiliar private label products. They wanted the brands they already knew and trusted. This shift away from popular national brands is widely viewed as one of the key factors that quietly eroded customer loyalty during exactly the moment the company needed loyalty the most. Economics stopped working next. As sales slowed, the company's cash position weakened. That set off a vicious cycle. Less cash meant less ability to buy new inventory, which meant emptier shelves, which meant a worse shopping experience, which pushed even more customers toward competitors, which further reduced revenue. Each piece made the next piece worse. And finally, leadership mistakes compounded everything else. The turnaround strategy that was supposed to fix the company's problems instead accelerated them, alienating loyal shoppers right as the company most needed to hold onto every customer it had left. Meanwhile, suppliers were watching all of this happen in real time, and they started getting nervous. Vendors and suppliers grew increasingly hesitant to ship merchandise to Bed Bath & Beyond, worried about whether the retailer would actually be able to pay its bills. That hesitation translated directly into physical reality, emptier shelves in stores nationwide, at the exact moment the company could least afford to look weak. Fewer products on the shelves meant a worse experience for every customer who walked in, which pushed even more of them to shop elsewhere. A slow bleed that fed on itself, month after month. This is the part of the story most people never see. There was no single dramatic moment yet. Just a company getting quietly weaker, one bad quarter at a time, while still technically open for business every single day. By January of 2023, the cracks became impossible to hide. Bed Bath & Beyond reported a sharp decline in net sales for its fiscal third quarter and, for the first time, publicly confirmed it was exploring options to shore up its finances. Buried in that announcement was a warning that should have sent shockwaves through the retail world. Without additional financing, the company might be forced into bankruptcy. The following month, in February 2023, the company announced a complicated financing deal designed to raise more than $1 billion, but only if a specific set of conditions were met. It was a lifeline, but a fragile one, dependent on investors continuing to believe in a turnaround that had already failed once. It wasn't enough. The financing plan couldn't generate the long-term capital the company actually needed, because the underlying business kept deteriorating faster than the rescue plan could stabilize it. And as word spread through the industry that Bed Bath & Beyond's finances were in serious trouble, supplier confidence collapsed even further. Fewer vendors were willing to ship merchandise on credit to a retailer that might not be able to pay them back. The stores felt it immediately. Shelves that were already thinner than usual grew even emptier, a visible, physical symptom of a financial crisis playing out behind the scenes. Customers walking in for a simple errand were instead met with half-stocked aisles, an unmistakable sign that something was seriously wrong. Through the early months of 2023, the company kept closing stores across the country, trying to cut costs and preserve whatever cash it had left. But by spring, most retail analysts had reached the same conclusion: bankruptcy wasn't just possible anymore. It was increasingly likely, unless a major financial rescue or buyer appeared out of nowhere. Nobody appeared. On April 23, 2023, it became official. Bed Bath & Beyond filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the United States, after failing to secure the funding it needed to keep operating as a going concern. In its own announcement, the company stated it would begin an orderly wind-down of the business while simultaneously searching for buyers for all or part of its assets. For a brief period, stores and the website kept running, but everyone involved understood what was actually happening. Liquidation sales were beginning, and this wasn't a pause, it was the end. Over the following weeks, liquidation sales rolled out across hundreds of Bed Bath & Beyond and Bye Bye Baby locations nationwide. Everything must go signs replaced the familiar blue and white branding in storefront windows across the country. Thousands of employees were affected as stores wound down operations and eventually closed their doors for good, ending careers and store locations that in some cases had been part of their communities for decades. Then, in June 2023, came the moment that decided what would actually survive. Overstock.com won the bankruptcy auction for the Bed Bath & Beyond brand, the name, the trademarks, the domain, and the rest of its intellectual property, for $21.5 million. To put that in perspective, this was a company once valued at $14 billion, and its most valuable remaining asset, the name itself, sold for a fraction of a % of that former value. Critically, that deal didn't include any of the physical stores, the distribution centers, or the remaining inventory. Overstock wasn't buying a retail chain. It was buying a name, pure brand equity, stripped of everything that used to be attached to it. Remember that mystery I promised you at the beginning? Here it is. The name Bed Bath & Beyond didn't die in that bankruptcy filing. It didn't disappear along with the 1,500 stores that once carried it. Instead, it went through something almost symbolic of the entire retail industry's transformation. After acquiring the brand, Overstock made a bold decision. It would abandon its own established name and rebrand its entire online retail business as Bed Bath & Beyond, betting that decades of consumer recognition were worth more than Overstock's own identity. On August 1, 2023, Overstock officially changed its corporate name to Beyond Incorporated, cementing a strategy built entirely around the Bed Bath & Beyond brand going forward. So today, if you go to the Bed Bath & Beyond website, it still exists. You can still shop there. The logo still looks familiar. But it's not the company that built it. It's an online-only marketplace, run by an entirely different corporate parent, with none of the physical stores, none of the original employees, and none of the wedding registry counters that made the brand what it was for 50 years. Meanwhile, Bye Bye Baby, one of the company's most valuable subsidiary brands, took a different path entirely. In July 2023, Dream on Me Industries acquired its intellectual property, and unlike its parent brand, Bye Bye Baby actually continued operating through a mix of online sales and select physical stores. The empty building, the 1,500 stores that once defined this brand, is gone. What survived is just the name, floating on top of a completely different business, worn like a mask over something that used to be a giant. So what's the biggest lesson here?